Last season, both the Stanford Cardinal and Oregon Ducks had seasons to remember, both going to BCS Bowls, and they finished with a combined record of 23-4. They definitely did the Pac-12 North proud. Now let's talk about a division that was primarily the opposite, the Pac-12 South. And I know if USC weren't on probation last season, that they would have gone to the Pac-12 championship game and not only would have given Oregon all they wanted, but might have been able to beat them again. Remember, they won earlier in the year in Eugene. So somebody from the South had to go. That somebody was UCLA. Despite the fact that they were 6-6 overall, in the week of the championship game, actually fired this guy, their head coach, Rick Neuheisel, and he still got to coach in the Pac-12 championship game. And of course, Oregon won the game. UCLA would end up finishing the season at 6-8, becoming the first bowl-eligible team in college football history with 8 losses. So changes were in store, and those changes are coming in the form of Jim Mora Jr., the former NFL head coach, now comes to Westwood to try to turn UCLA fortunes around. And he'll need to do so with an offense that used to be primarily run first, but now UCLA will be pretty much a pro-style passing attack, which means you're going to be seeing a lot of no huddle. It's going to be a faster-paced offense, but don't get me wrong, running back Jonathan Franklin will still be utilized, and last year he was the workhorse for the Bruins. Currently, he's 9th on UCLA's all-time rushing list, so no doubt he's going to finish as one of their best running backs in school history. Speaking of terrific players coming back for the Bruins, how about Joseph Fourier? Joseph Fourier, the tight end, he's going to be a big target for whoever the quarterback is, either Kevin Prince or Richard Breho. This is an area, and if you're a UCLA fan, please let me know who you think should be the quarterback and will be the quarterback. I know Prince has had a lot of experience, but to me, he seems a little inconsistent. But at least offensive lineman Xavier Safila returns after being gone 2 years due to a Mormon mission, so they'll have him coming back on the interior. Defensively last year, UCLA was terrible. They couldn't get to the quarterback often, averaging just 1 sack per game, one of the worst ratios in the NCAA in 2011. That has to be shored up, and hopefully defensive end Dayton Jones will help at that cause. If you're looking at the schedule for UCLA, it's really not that bad. A couple of intriguing games in September facing both Houston and Nebraska, both coming to the Rose Bowl. Even though the Nebraska game will be a difficult one to win, it's not exactly impossible. Plus the conference schedule, there's no Oregon on it. And of course, traditionally, you always play USC at the end of the year. So at least when you play the Trojans, by the time you play them, UCLA should have a better understanding of what type of team they have and a little more familiarity with the new coaching staff. I see UCLA winning 7 games this year and finishing 3rd in the South. Last year was a tale of 2 seasons for the Arizona State Sun Devils. They started off well, winning 5 of their first 6 games, including wins over Mizzou, USC, and Utah. But the second half of the season, after the Oregon loss, things went downhill quickly. Ended up losing 5 of their last 6 games, and Dennis Erickson ended up losing his job because of the downward spiral. The Sun Devils now are coached by Todd Graham, the former University of Tulsa head coach. We thought he was going to be at Pittsburgh for a while, but was there just 1 year and surprisingly left Pitt and came to Tempe. Not a surprise that he's coaching at Arizona State, but the fact that he was there at Pitt just 1 year. Cameron Marshall, I think, in the beginning of the year at least, is going to be the meat and potatoes of this offense because he's one of the few Sun Devils returning on the offensive side of the ball. Marshall is a workhorse. Marshall is a guy you can count on. In fact, the running game for Arizona State is pretty experienced. But the offensive line's not, only returning 2 offensive linemen, plus you have new receivers as well as a new quarterback. It looks like it's going to be Mike Bercovici or Taylor Kelly's job. One of them will have to replace last year's starter, the tall Brock Osweiler, who left early for the NFL. On the defensive side, you have the majority of starters back, and it'll help to get Brandon McGee back, but really watch out because last year had some injury issues with his Achilles, and you have a good defensive lineman returning in Will Sutton. But other than McGee's return, the linebacking core is going to be pretty thin for ASU, and the safeties are going to be inexperienced as well, which is a bad recipe in the Pac-12 because it's such a pass-happy league. The schedule, not kind to the Sun Devils. A couple of non-conference games in September could be troublesome. Hosting Missouri, a team that they lost to last year, plus Missouri wants big-time revenge after losing to the Sun Devils last year. This year's game is in Columbia, Missouri. So good luck to Arizona State. And by the way, you still got to play Oregon. You still got to play USC. So for Arizona State, I foresee them finishing 5th in the South because I think it's going to be a transition year for them, and it's going to be borderline on if they can get to that necessary 6-win bowl total. While Arizona State fired their head coach at the end of last season, Arizona fired their head coach Mike Stoops during the middle of 2011, but during the offseason made a big announcement by hiring Rich Rodriguez, the former West Virginia as well as Michigan head coach, who will bring the spread option offense to Tucson. Matt Scott looks like it's going to be the quarterback, and it's a pretty good thing. He's been there for a while, and he's a multi-dimensional athlete, so he should be able to run the spread option type offense. Scott, of course, has some big shoes to fill, filling in for Nick Foles. If you're looking at the defensive side, there's also going to be some changes there. They're going to a 3-3-5 defense, and they've got a lot of shoes to fill. Linebacker Jake Fisher, though, does come back for the Wildcats. Like I said, this is a team that's going to be very young in many spots, and if you're looking at the schedule, in September, that 3-3-5 defense will be tested because they'll be going against Toledo and Oklahoma State, two really good offenses, plus Arizona facing that tough Pac-12 part of the schedule, which will include Oregon. So if you're looking at Arizona, they're kind of like Arizona State. They're going to be borderline toward getting to that necessary bowl win total of 6. I think Arizona, with Rodriguez, though, has an opportunity to do some really good things, and I foresee the Wildcats finishing 4th in the league as far as the South goes. Well, for the Colorado Buffaloes, it was a Rocky Mountain low in 2011, going 3-10. And this year, it doesn't look very good either for John Embry's squad. At quarterback, it could be Connor Wood. That's right, Connor Wood. You might remember him from the University of Texas, transferring from UT to now CU. If Wood doesn't start, Nick Hirschman should get the call as signal caller. But offensively for the Buffaloes, not a lot of optimism in terms of the skilled players because they're pretty much going to be new. 3 offensive linemen do return for the Buffs, including David Bakhtiari, who was last season an all Pac-12 selection second team. The defense last year had their bad moments, and too many of them. They were very susceptible against the run, especially against the really good teams, and last year not very opportunistic. The Buffaloes only forced 15 turnovers. This has been an ongoing problem because the year before they only forced 19. That's 34 total takeaways in 2 seasons. No wonder the defense had major issues. The linebacking core, though, that does present a little bit of hope with both John Major and Doug Rippey in the lineup for the Buffs. The schedule, at least this year, is not like last year's. In 2011, believe it or not, they played 13 games with only 5 of them at Folsom Field. This year's schedule is a little more merciful as they'll start the year against rival Colorado State. They'll play that one in Denver. Plus, there are games at Fresno State as well as Sacramento State. So there are chances for Colorado to get some wins. But then the second half of the schedule, they'll have a 3-game stretch in which they'll get Stanford, Oregon, as well as USC back-to-back-to-back. Yeah, so the second half is going to show its ugly face as far as that schedule goes. The Buffaloes might be a good team a few years from now because of so many youth that they're starting in 2012, but for this year, they're going to take their licks. Well, for the Utah Utes, last season, they took their licks as far as being a first-year Pac-12 squad, just like Colorado. They started off rough making that transition and found out that the Pac-12 is definitely not the Mountain West Conference. But at least at the end of the season, Utah finished on a high note, winning 4 of their last 5 games and finishing with a modest 8-5 record. This year, a lot of offensive weapons are back, including quarterback Jordan Wynn. Biggest question for him, though, can he stay healthy? He's had a couple of shoulder surgeries, and the Utah offensive line has to do their part. Last year, their pass protection was poor. Last season, though, John White was a standout. The running back had over 1,500 yards, and he returns. So Utah's going to have a 2-dimensional threat, and wide receiver, a veteran one, Devontae Christopher, is back for Utah. So there are a lot of offensive weapons, like I said, and they should be able to run and pass the ball efficiently. If you're looking at the defense, look at this guy, Star Aletulele. 325 pounds, commands double teams, and I think is going to play in the NFL one day. If you command double teams, naturally the rest of that defensive line is going to be able to get to the quarterback easier. And that's a good thing because on the defensive end side as well as the linebacking side, Utah is not as experienced, but at least their secondary does have a lot of experience. The schedule for Utah, they could not have asked for anything more. It's not a difficult non-conference slate. Their toughest game looks like it'll be BYU, but that game's at home at Salt Lake City. And there's no Oregon on the schedule or Stanford. In fact, the game of the year in the Pac-12 South, all eyes are pointing on the Thursday night game in early October against Southern Cal, who might be number 1 or number 2 at that point in the season. USC will be expected to win, but remember, the game is in Utah, and strange things often happen on nationally televised Thursday night games. So that game is definitely not one to sleep on. Utah may not win the South, but they'll have a better season in 2012 than they did in 2011, and 2011 wasn't too shabby. I expect the Utes to have at least a 9-win year and finish second. And that takes me to USC, the Trojans. Last season, despite being on probation, it didn't stop them from having success winning 10 ball games, and this year they're going to be number 1 or number 2 in the major polls you look at. Biggest reason is because of the amount of starters that they have back, and USC's off probation, so they're eligible for the Pac-12 championship, for a bowl game, and maybe a whole lot more than that. Matt Barkley surprised a lot by deciding to come back for one more year after passing up a lot of money in the NFL. Barkley last season, over 3,500 yards passing, 39 TDs, and he's going to be a Heisman contender amongst a lot of voters. The receiving core, experienced and dangerous, with both Marquise Lee and potential All-American Robert Woods back at the wideouts. Both had over 1,000 yards receiving in 2011. And the running game, 1,000-yard rusher returns in the form of Curtis McNeil, along with 4 offensive linemen. But a couple of things to watch out for if you're nitpicking USC. They do lose the left tackle and Matt Khalil. He was a high draft pick, and they have to replace the fullback. But other than that, USC's offense will be hard for even the best defenses in college football to stop. And the defense, they return 8 starters from Monty Kiffin's defensive unit. Of course, he is Lane Kiffin's dad. On the defensive side, T.J. McDonald, an All-American, returns, as well as Nikhil Roby, and defensive end Wes Horton is back too. So the defense, they're not ever going to be compared to Alabama or LSU, but it's a defense that has quite a bit of athletes. And last season, the Trojans started a lot of freshmen at the linebacking positions, so you have all of them back. They have potential to be really good. The schedule for USC, just like for Utah, it's a good schedule. You look at the non-league part of it, they'll play Notre Dame. That's probably their toughest non-league game, and that game is at the Coliseum. There is that game at Utah that USC cannot overlook. That'll be, of course, early October, as we mentioned, on a Thursday night. And then the game of the year in the Pac-12, and one of the biggest games of the year nationwide, an early November showdown against the Oregon Ducks. And that game at LA could be the first of 2 games between these 2 teams, with Pac-12 South as well as possible national championship implications on the line. And, of course, the Pac-12 championship game, the division winner with the best record gets to host the game. So the winner of that Oregon-USC game, you got to think is going to be hosting that championship game in December. And if those 2 games between Oregon and USC, and I think they will play twice, or anything like last year's game, we're in for a big treat. I look for USC to win the South overwhelmingly, and I think that they will beat Oregon twice this season, and I think they'll beat them both times in order to win the Pac-12, and I think they'll be playing in the national championship game against LSU. I'll give you my winner of who I think will win the national championship between the Trojans and Tigers at the end of all my reviews. So that's a look at the Pac-12 South. My next preview, we're going to go to the Big Ten, and I will talk about the Legends Division. So long for now.